This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Is possibly the most dramatic music you will ever hear playing on Resource Center. But yes, you are listening to Resource Center, and it being the first Tuesday of the month, this is Endeavour Hour, where we speak to high-impact individuals within the Endeavour network in Malaysia and around the world. Hello there, I'm Audrey Raj. But seriously though, what is up with the spine-tingling music, right? Well, okay, just bear with me. I thought we'd do something different with this episode of Endeavour Hour, because you know how Endeavour is a global organization that selects mentors and accelerates high-impact entrepreneurs in like 27 countries and 50-plus cities. And these entrepreneurs always have some pretty interesting stories, but how many of them can call themselves world-class and built in Malaysia? On the show today, we're about to speak to Endeavour entrepreneur Alex Fernandez. He's the co-founder and CEO of Streamline Studios, which you may know as Southeast Asia's largest video game developer. Based in Bangsa South, Streamline has worked with AAA publishers on over 200 amazing titles such as Final Fantasy XV, BioShock Infinite, and Gears of War, which is the theme song that you're listening to right now. So okay, enough of the drama, let's just get to business. A video game business set up by teenagers living off ramen and, well, big dreams. Here's Endeavour entrepreneur Alex Fernandez, who came from very humble beginnings in Utah, but today is a video game creator, industry changer, and entrepreneur extraordinaire.
Well, I mean, I can put it this way. My mom is from Nicaragua. My dad's from El Salvador. I'm Latino, growing up in Utah. Immigrants came over because of a civil war that happened in Nicaragua in the 1970s. And then ultimately what ended up happening is that I really got a break from the fact that my mother gave me a computer. My brother and I have a twin brother named Hector. We got a computer when we were about 12 years old. And that really, we started to just take it apart. It was basically a way for my mom to keep us from going onto the streets. It was just like, here, stay at home and use the machine. And then we started to lie about how old we were. Got our first job when we were 13. Somehow convinced people that we were 16 years old. And then that just started the career kind of moving forward. And the curiosity was about how do you basically use technology, but also dovetailed with the fact that we've been playing Nintendo since we were 7. And that happened because my aunt said it was better than a babysitter. It was cheaper. So, get the Nintendo, here you go. And that just kind of brought these two passions together, technology and gaming. And, I was very fortunate that the .com was happening and that there was all this opportunity happening, upwards momentum. I was, at that time, I graduated in 97. Effectively, and then never looked back and just started just kind of on the journey of making games and just trying to kind of stay ahead of things, But ultimately, version 1.0 of Streamline, the company started off in Amsterdam back in 2001. I was 20 years old. I was a lot thinner, had more hair, and it was this kind of a commune of people. My co-founders and I, we started the company inside of a 70 square meter apartment where ultimately we had 8 people living and working, kind of dreaming of making games. We had no money, so we call ourselves a starve-up company. So we just pretty much starved to make it work, right? Kind of concept. But the entire goal here was just to keep making games. And at the time, in order to actually make video games, you had to work with publishers. It was very much a walled garden. You had to work with these monolithic companies who they would make a decision on whether or not you would actually get into the business. Very much like how recording used to be, right? If you think about it this way, to make a demo or a demonstration of a game would cost anywhere between $250,000 to as high as $1.5 million. We didn't have that type of money. We're a bunch of poor kids. So we're like, okay, well, what can we do? And the concept came around, well, why don't we offer our talent as a service? And so we ended up creating a business, Malign, that was all about providing art to the rest of the video games industry. Now, this is 2000, and the concept of outsourcing or using external development hasn't even reached the games industry yet. So at our first trade show, I'm going there trying to push our services to people, and they're like, kid, it's never going to happen. Go home. You're out of your mind. And I'm like, well, I don't understand how it's not going to happen when this is really the way the business is happening, right? I mean, people want to use external sources of talent. Now, the thing is to keep in mind, making a AAA video game at that time was getting pretty big. We were like, oh, you need more than 30 people, which makes me laugh because now you need more than 500 people on certain of these games. At that time, people were like, you're out of your mind. And I'm like, no, it's going to happen. And it did start happening step by step, though. Brutal step by step, because ultimately we financed ourselves by getting work. And sometimes we got it and sometimes we didn't. And when we didn't have it, well, ate a lot of ramen noodles and rice.
Let's start up again, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
but why did you choose Europe?
20 years old, man, you know. Got an opportunity to go live and work in Holland. I got this email one day saying, do you want to come to Amsterdam? And I'm like, okay. Sounds like a good place to go hang out. And, Pulp Fiction had come out. So I'm like, mayonnaise and other things. So why not? Let's go and see what Holland is. And I went there. And, you take a chance. You think about it this way. A lot of things, I would love to tell you it was like some master plan or some genius level thing. But it wasn't. Because the thing is, I was 19 when the email came. I was 20 when I ended up showing up there. I figured that I'd be better off by just doing it than if I did not go, right? Yeah. Take a chance, and then that changed my entire life. And that's one of those things where when we got to Europe at the time, I mean, it was Europe back when it was like liberal and amazing and everything was filled with possibility and social systems. It's not Europe now, which is unfortunate, but Europe back then was a hell of a good time.
So you finally got into making video games by modifying existing games, and subsequently you got your break by working on Gunman Chronicles by Sierra. Tell us that story. Yeah, so Gunman Chronicles is actually a first mod gone retail product, and it was actually my partners and I who had the opportunity of working on a project back when we were teenagers, and ultimately that game became a product that was published. Now, the thing is, what's interesting about Gunman is that Gunman reflects this hobbyist mentality and the way the games industry really much used to be, where if you wanted to make these games, you could effectively take a game that existed, you could break it open, you could effectively unpack the art, unpack the sound, unpack the programming, and modify it, and then repackage it together and make something completely new, or even stuff in your own art. In doing so, we were able to demonstrate the ability of the team, which got the attention of the makers of Half-Life, Valve Software. And that really became the game lesson that got our business up and off the ground. Now, that was pre-Streamline. And then post that, took that understanding and basically wrapped it into a company that went out there to try to make art for other businesses. Was that the big realization for you, that you could be an outsourced partner to work with big publishers in creating these titles? I mean, maybe you can talk us through Streamline's growth from from that early 2000s to late 2000s. So, the thing is like this, like necessity and hunger really drove the business. We wanted to make our own games, but the problem is there's no money, right? So in the absence of capital, you find the next thing, which is provide our services to other people. The idea is, okay, they do it in Hollywood, they do it in IT, why won't they do it in games? So our premise was offer the services, take the profits, reinvest it into the making of our own games. Now, the thing is, you're talking about $1 million type of development fees, so you got to work a little bit to get there. And the process of Streamline was very simple. From our first project that was $6,000 to effectively multi-million-dollar deals by 2008, the process was really centered around a group of people who just believed in each other, kept trying, burnt our hands on everything that could go wrong, from how do you start a business? I don't know, let's figure it out, to how do you run a business? I don't know, let's figure it out, to hiring the right people, the wrong people, having things go horribly wrong and then having to fix it again. But ultimately, always trying to figure out how do we optimize ourselves from our craft level, so the art and the engineering and the design, but also paying attention to this thing called business. Now, this is very funny because at the time, a lot of artists, well, I don't think that much hasn't changed here, but at the time for us, we were very just craft-focused people, artistic people. Business was just a thing that you had to do. It wasn't anything that you wanted to do. But we ended up reading this book called The E-Myth, which I'll never forget. And they have this line that's very clever. It's work on your business, not in your business. And when we read that line, and we basically read it as a group, so there's 4 of us inside of this house reading this book, what we began to realize is just because you know how to fix cars and you're the best
auto mechanic doesn't mean you'll be the best person running the auto mechanic shop. Right?
Very true.
And as we understood the fact that the skill of running a business is just as powerful as the skill of making your craft or your art or your design in this case, we began to pay attention to it. And then that kind of obsessiveness of, okay, well, what can we do to fine-tune our engine? And in some cases, build the engine as we're moving, started to creep in. And that is really what transformed our business. It was the day that we said, you know what? Yeah, we're artists. Yeah, we're engineers. We're great craftspeople. But our craft isn't going to be what's going to feed us. It's going to be the ability to take all of our crafts, provide it to the rest of the world in a way that's going to make sense. And that's where passion met reality and the need to eat. And when they hit each other, reality took over. And that is, I think, what really created our business to fly, because we stopped being trapped by this, my art, I bleed for purple, and oh my gosh, it's like, you know what I bleed for? Some ramen noodles. I'd like to eat tomorrow. I'd like to pay my rent. Practicality came in. And I was just like, this is fantastic, because it then propelled us to a new place where we looked at things not just from a creative standpoint or a technical standpoint, but from a, does this make sense for the business? Are we going to get to that next rung of where we're trying to go, which was always make our own games. But you got to make money. And being in Europe, I mean, that's kind of hard because you got the taxes and you got the social systems, and then you also have the fact that it costs a lot. I mean, I don't think people realize how expensive it truly is to be over there. I mean, it's 2/3 the price of here, and that's being gracious about it. It's a lot more than that, but, it's what you have to learn.
When we come back, Endeavor entrepreneur Alex Fernandez talks about losing it all in a split second. Endeavor Hour on Resource Center. We'll be right back after these messages. BFM 89.9.
Bankers, financiers, and moneymakers. BFM 89.9.
You're still listening to Endeavor Hour on Resource Center. My name is Audrey Raj. If you're just joining us, we have on the show today Alex Fernandez, co-founder and CEO of Streamline Studios, which is Southeast Asia's largest video game developer. Alex was just telling us about how he and his friends, on necessity and pure hunger, grew Streamline Studios from taking $6,000 jobs to raking in multi-million-dollar deals in less than a decade. But all of this didn't last for too long, thanks to the global financial crisis. So I hear there was a painful lesson that happened sometime in 2009.
Yeah.
Everything came crashing down, is the term?
No, yeah.
What
dying, basically. You had to die and become reborn. It's a very, when I say this, I get very philosophical about it, but the financial crisis happened. I mean, I think, we look at the financial crisis as something that kind of just happened. And in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, especially for a lot of businesses, it did just happen. It was like nothing you could do about it. One day you woke up, Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt. The next day, credit in the market freezes. The next day, your customers are going bankrupt, owing you money. And that's effectively what happened to us. I mean, I ended up in a situation where I watched Lehman Brothers collapse and then watch as 20 million euros of signed contracts start disappearing until finally, 10 months later, 11 months later after the fact, it's like there's nowhere to go. And the painful lesson just came down to this, is that it didn't matter how good we were. It didn't matter how right we were. It didn't matter everything we did, which was after all the sacrifice and after all the ups and downs of living this journey, there was just nothing we could do, because it was literally like the world poo-pooed itself. And here we are, and unfortunately it hit me. And we ended up in a situation where we had to downsize and ultimately shut down our studio in Amsterdam. But then that's what also created this great opportunity of where I'm sitting at right now, because that was a transformation. It was this moment in time where it's like, okay, you can either cry about it or you can say, okay, you know what, let's do something else.
So then came Kuala Lumpur and Streamline version 2.0.
Yeah.
How did you first come across KL?
So I got to have a shout out to the MDEC. There's a guy named Hasnell that works at the MDEC, and he's the guy. He came up to us back in 2006 in San Francisco. He took me to dinner with a bunch of other people. And he's like, I got to tell you about this place. Malaysia, great artists, great designers, engineers. They're fantastic at what they do. Good food, which I'm like, okay, that's important because I like to eat. So, I'm like, okay, you got me. Well, he had me at the food part. I was like, okay, let's get over there. And he flies me out, a partner and I, in 2009, So we're in the process of basically winding everything down. He's like, you know what? Come over. And I remember telling him, like, look, man, I don't know. It's like we're going through this hell of a time. It's, it's brutal what's happening to us. We're getting slammed around. But he's like, don't worry, just come here. So they bring us out to the Creative Conference in 2009. And I remember when we arrived, I was just like, this place is so beautiful. First off, it's just beautiful, right? And then you're meeting all these nice people. And then they're seeing and showing us all of their work. And that's when I realized, like, I'm like, how is it possible that I've never heard of this outside of Malaysia, truly Asia tourism, that I don't realize that there's all of these talented artists and engineers and designers that are speaking English to me and then at the same time understand, Eastern cultures from the Japanese to the Chinese to the Indians to then Western culture as well. Like this mix. I'm like, how do I not know this? And then a friend of mine looks at me. He's like, sure you do. He's like, 64% of the people who work in Singapore, where do you think they come from? And he was referring to the games industry. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then I started remembering, like, all these studios I saw when I was in Singapore. I'm like, that's right, they're Malaysian. It was funny because I actually thought Singaporeans were Malaysians at the time. Now that I think about it right now, I actually realized that. And then this was the thing that started to propel itself forward. And as we see that, I look at my partner, and we're convinced within the second day that we need to come here. So we end up going back to Europe. And that winter, we're all sitting there. Winter is cold in Amsterdam. It's very cold, like
imagine.
brutal cold.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there just kind of looking at each other on a wooden table, and we're like, okay, we can either go our separate ways, and we'll be all successful on our own, or we can just keep the band together, try to get that last album out, and let's see if it's a hit. And we decided to do that, except now we have to move halfway around the world, and no one knows anyone here. And we end up at, what is it called? The Pyramid, but it wasn't the Pyramid. What is this place called? Subang. So we end up in Subang in an apartment there. And we're like, let's do it again. And that's what happened.
But why Kuala Lumpur, and maybe why not Singapore or any other Southeast Asian country?
I think the thing is you got to remember something about the games industry is that what we learned in 2008 and 2009 is that sustainability is completely predicated on cost of living. Let's just break it down. It's like, there's a runway. Let's imagine that we have a plane we're about to take off on. The longer the runway, the more chances of getting that plane off the ground. If the runway is short, you'll crash and burn and we all die. So in this case, we're like, well, the runway is made of cost. If the costs are sufficiently low and the talent is high, there is a chance you can get the plane off the ground. So as we were looking around the world, assessing different places, and we had different options. It actually had come down to KL and Rio de Janeiro. And we're looking at it. We're like, oh, Rio's nice. It's fantastic. I don't know if you've been to Brazil, but it's beautiful. It's like Rio looks like this, except it's Brazil. And everyone's like happy. And, well, they're happy here too, but it's a different, it's Latino happy, which is very different. It's the reason why we have so many kids, so it's very much filled, right, that. And we came so close to it. But there was one thing Malaysia had over everything else. And that was the fact that language-wise, no one can beat how many languages get spoken here. And that's when I sat down and you looked at it and you're like, wait, it's a thriving population of youngsters that are bilingual or trilingual, and they're creative and they're talented. Then, I looked at my guys and like, I'm the one that's going to end up speaking Portuguese because, I'm speaking Spanish already, so that's easy for me. And I look at the guys and I'm like, I got Germans and Dutch. I'm like, I don't think that's going to happen. So let's KL. So we ended up over here.
So tell us about how the way you work with publishers today has changed. I mean, you're no longer just an outsourced body shop, but far more involved in the creative and the development process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're referring to is basically co-developments, which is there's an evolution that's happened in the games industry. So you put it this way, it's like, the amount of people it takes to make a modern AAA game. So we're talking about games like Final Fantasy 15. You're talking about things like Grand Theft Auto, or even some of the stuff that's being made out at Ubisoft. You're talking about hundreds of people for years. And what ends up happening is that you need people that are highly skilled, that understand how to do the work. But where are you going to find them? Because there's limited resources. And this is something that people don't realize, that the talent to do this, it's high. It's very rare to find. And when you find them, you need to hold on to them because everyone else is looking for the same thing. So when we started this business, we realized that our entire aim and our angle was the fact that we're game makers. We've been making games since the 90s. So for us, it's not about outsourcing. It's never been about that. It's been about external development and really just a means to an end to make our own game, right? We still need to make our hit record. Yeah. That's what we want to do. But then when we went through this process, we began to realize that a lot of our customers and a lot of our partners, they were suffering from the fact that they couldn't find people in the cost base they needed to work from in order to do the work. Because, these games are between $40 to $100 million to make. Development, that's not marketing, right? It's crazy how big these are. So what ends up happening here is that we start to say, well, let's just expand our services. Let's give them solutions they don't even know. Let's help get them to where they need to be, which is ultimately they want us to think with them. They want us to augment and accelerate them. They don't want to teach us. And honestly, we're not here to be taught. I mean, this ain't school. We're here to work together and get ourselves to that point. So we started to just create technologies, a platform that we made called Streamframe that basically brings people together. At the same time, we began to offer new ways of working. Started off with what we called art development, which went into integrated content, where we would actually take the content, integrate it into the game, and then deliver a build, which is an executable. Then we moved into code dev, which is, well, we'll do the design and engineering here. And then we'll wrap art around it too. And in this way, it'd be like you and I are working together on a project, and we just work together that way. Then it went on to the place where they're like, well, you know what? You guys can do this. Why don't you do a full game for us? And we're like, yeah, of course we can, which is game development, right?
Yeah.
Fully end-to-end. In the end, this is where this industry is going. You have to look at it from a perspective that if it costs so much money to make a game, how many $40, $100 million games can you afford to lose on? And that's really where it just comes down to. So Southeast Asia, specifically Asia in general, the entire opportunity that's coming this way is to make the projects end-to-end, but also do the development end-to-end.
So that's where you see the future of the business, say, in 5 years?
I see it's happening now. What I'm talking about, everything I've just told you is happening right now in my office, right now.
So what's the future looking like?
I think the future is basically you're going to see a dominant Southeast Asian publisher. You're going to see a dominant and vibrant Southeast Asian economy, an ecosystem that is completely self-contained and at the same time working overseas. I really like to tell my partners and people I work with about a vision of ours, which is South by South trade. It's Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, trading amongst each other. It's, Malacca in the 1500s being the center of, trade, then fueling trade in other parts of the world. I think that we're about to see in the next 5 years a tremendous shift going back to what effectively made the West so rich, by effectively leveraging what has already been here and has always been here, resources, people, and know-how. And now you have the great value of the fact that your runway here is as long and wide as the open road, and no one can take that. And that's where I think you're going to end up seeing a lot of people coming here just trying to be a part of it, because the runway in other parts of the world is as short and as ghetto as it can be, because they didn't take care of it.
When we come back, CEO of Streamline Studios, Alex Fernandez, talks to us about his Endeavor experience and how it's changed his business in ways he never imagined. Endeavor Hour on Resource Center will be right back. BFM 89.9.
Business, finance, and more. BFM 89.9.
You're listening to Endeavor Hour on Resource Center. My name is Audrey Raj. Our Endeavor entrepreneur for the month of August is none other than Alex Fernandez, co-founder and CEO of Streamline Studios, Southeast Asia's largest video game developer. Based in Bangsa South, Streamline has worked with AAA publishers on over 200 titles like Final Fantasy XV, BioShock Infinite, and Gears of War, among others. So what kind of video games does a video game developer play in his free time? So, Alex, we've been talking about all these games, and like you said, you've been playing games since you were like 7.
Yeah.
What do you play today? And has your concept of what a game should be changed, knowing just how much it costs and what goes into the process of making these games?
Well, this is funny because the thing is like this. I get asked a lot, what am I playing? And to be honest with you, what I'm playing right now, the one that I'm playing right now is Super Mario 2. I play that with my daughter. I have a 2.5-year-old girl, and I put Princess Peach on so that she can relate to a character. I'm like, let's play together. So we play this in there. And when she goes away and her mom's not watching, I then switch over to like Street Fighter 5, or I'm playing Uncharted 4. I'm playing games that are like hardcore fun, Star Wars Battlefront I really love too. But yeah, you do, when you look at what you're going to make, it does go through my mind, how much does it cost to make things? That's kind of the downside of making games, because you know what it takes to do it, so you're calculating.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, here's what it is. But you can celebrate the art form, and in ways I do look at it and I'm like, okay, well, if we were to do it, what would be if we did it? And so when we look at some of the games we have in development right now, a lot of that's come into play because you realize you have this amazing space that you can play with. Because honestly, cost isn't the concern, at least not in the way it would be if I was in Japan or in the U.S., which is great. So it means we can be more iterative, more creative, and try crazy ideas, which I really enjoy. But right now, honestly, the one I'm looking forward to, if I really just kind of get into it right now, is that a lot of the VR games that are coming out are really cool. PlayStation VR is really cool. I really just want to play more of those.
And how is that going to change the industry?
I think what you're going to see here is basically this, is that the industry, the games industry specifically, is changing because in the end, we have a legitimacy that's coming and driven by the fact that other industries that are non-gaming need our skills. UI, UX, 3D, engineering, game engines being utilized in non-gaming applications, from commercial design, industrial design, to basically VR, how do you interact with data, to AR, right? I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the skills that we do to entertain kids are the skills that's just going to be required in almost everyday life because of the amount of data that we have to see. And when you take a step back and you think about it, entertainment technology has generally been the driver of change in technology. We will see this sweep into other mediums, from healthcare over to basically, say, applied sciences.
Everything. Yeah.
Everything. I mean, it's everything. Like, how do you visualize the world? And that is one of the things I think is going to be fantastic. It's like we're going to, if I put on my helmet, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in 3D space. Or it's going to be me and you sitting here with an iPhone looking at over here across the way to these buildings and a bunch of data saying, oh, this is what it is, 6 units for sale, virtual tour, get in it. That's that connected future we're going to, which is just, I think, amazing for us.
All right, coming back to business and Endeavor business. Now, you were selected as an Endeavor entrepreneur late last year. I mean, after all you've been through, why was it important for you to do this? Yeah,
that's a very good question. And, first, a big shout out for the Endeavor guys because they had to put up with me a lot. I mean, honestly, like I'm a handful. So here's the thing. And what it was that, when you're doing something long enough, it's very easy to either fall into the side where you think you know everything or go to the side where you realize you don't know. You just don't know, right? And it's only because in the end of the day, I think that there has to be a form of humility that, I appreciate where I've come from and I appreciate what it took to get here. But where we have to be and where I believe this future is requires more input from people who are also as experienced, if not more experienced, and come from different perspectives in different industries that I may have nothing or will never be a part of. And what Endeavor was able to offer was a type of mentorship, advisory, a type of access to people that they don't look at my industry the way I do. They're not looking at it with, as they say, the Germans say, pink goggles, so to speak, like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. They're like, do you make money or not? Are you eating or not? Are you responsible or not? They look at it from a purely business, technical type of angle, which I love. And then at the same time, there's this layer of like, can-do spirit and really about what does it mean to actually grow your business forward. And so when I ended up meeting these guys and we started talking through it, I began to realize just we need access. We need people. And for myself as an entrepreneur and just as a CEO, I realized I can't do this by myself because, I have no formal training in this. All I have is like, feeling out the world, burning my hands. And I'm like, I don't know how many times I want to burn my hand. I'm 36 years old. I got a kid. I don't want to wonder what could have been had I not, tapped into more resources and had people thinking and helping me. So Endeavor's been fantastic at doing that.
So the kind of mentors that you've worked with through the local and international selection process, tell me about the things that they have enlightened you with that you never even considered before.
It was funny because I remember going through the selection process and I've never been in a situation, at least not for a long time, where having someone basically challenge the basic premise of the business to then basically being grouped in an imperialist, which was very funny too. That was funny as well, knowing full, I'm Latino, dude. What are you talking about? So, but at the same time, I mean, what I have done is basically help me see just, how much culture matters, how much in terms of cash flow and finance, how much that kind of mixes together. But then on the flip side as well, just looking at it from a standpoint of just how amazing it is to have different culture. And this is what I mean by culture. Different people different, perspectives, different nationalities, ethnic backgrounds, religious beliefs, how much that influences people and the decisions people take, and how much, you look at that, you can mix it together to find something that works for you. And it's not something that, someone comes out and says, hey, this is what this is. It's just more a series of ongoing conversations that never stop. In fact, my very first conversation with one of the mentors was here. Actually in your guys' office over there. That little,
here at BFM?
Yeah, here at BFM, absolutely. And it was an amazing just journey because, I remember sitting here going through this thing, not realizing what is it going to be, and then coming back around and seeing it a year and a half later being like, this is incredible because from the local side, you see these pillars of industry. You see some real heavyweights, people that I'm like, wow, this is incredible what you've accomplished in your life. To then going to the international side where you end up with people that I'm like, wow, you run my industry. So it's been mind-boggling. And I guess one of the things that I've realized is how to do an effective meeting, how to be very effective, very fast, and be like, bang, 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 done. And, not my kind of like, we'll sit down and have a coffee. I'll ask you some things. I had one meeting recently where the guy came in and it was just like, bang, 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 done. Very New York. And I loved it because I'm like, how New York, and you get that thing. And then I had another meeting, it was very Latino, where I'm like, we're 10 minutes late, talk about tacos, and then here we go, you know what I mean? It was funny, it was you get an exposure that, you're just not going to get if your network is just in my case, a bunch of guys from Utah. It's like, what are they going to talk about, like pine trees and mountains?
So you think this kind of experience is beneficial for any startup or any entrepreneur there?
Absolutely. I believe that, honestly, if you want to excel, you need to be around people who are pushing hard as you, faster than you, or maybe in some places push you to be better. And I think what happens now in this concept of entrepreneurship, which when I started being an entrepreneur, it was called being unemployed. No one was like, oh, startup? Yeah, whatever, get a job. But this romanticism that I think gets put onto it now skews it to think that like somehow you're a born genius. You're not. Let's be clear. No one is. No one knows if it's going to work or not. But you're sure as heck going to work through the process of suffering through this, right? So it's selective suffering. You choose which one you want to go after. But if you have the opportunity and you have the option, you should be tapping into people. And it doesn't matter if they're, the leaders of, some massive tech company or the person that owns the French fries stand. Everyone who runs a business knows something. And I think the thing is just being able to sit down and talk and not feel like you have to defend yourself from every little thing. That's really great. And I think that's also something that the power of communication, you'll get that through this, especially when you have people that are telling you like, you know what, if you're a jack, I'm going to tell you straight up. That's what I think is really great. But yeah, they should do it. Endeavor should recruit more people.
I think we're done, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any words of advice before we go?
Yeah. I think that, for anyone who's out there that's thinking about doing their own business, I think you should really, I would always say you should embrace entrepreneurship and go for it. I think you just have to know the risks that are there. And really all that it comes down to is, are you willing to be accountable for yourself and other people? If you're willing to do that, then you know what? You're 90% of the way there. The other 10% is just enjoy suffering and it'll be fine. You'll
and ramen noodles.
Yeah, and rice, which is great over here because you have both.
Thank you so much, Alex, and all the best in all your future endeavors.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Come visit the studio. Come see how games are made.
Yes,
there you go.
Thank you. I've been speaking to Endeavor entrepreneur Alex Fernandez, co-founder and CEO of Streamline Studios, Southeast Asia's largest video game developer. Endeavor, of course, is a global organization that selects mentors and accelerates high-impact entrepreneurs from 27 countries around the world. Endeavor Malaysia currently sponsors 18 entrepreneurs from 13 companies in Malaysia, and you can visit endeavormalaysia.org, that's ENDEAVOR Malaysia.org, for more information. My name is Audrey Raj. You've been listening to Endeavor Hour on Resource Center, BFM 89.9.